It was indeed just like watching Brazil. Another 4 goals, another home win. Norwich City are really motoring at the moment under Johannes Hoff Thorup. Welcome back to the PinkUn.com Norwich City podcast in our beautiful surroundings here in our studio back at base, which has made the walk up the hill from Carrow Road on a fine afternoon for Norwich City. And now we have to pause for 2 weeks, but I'll rant about that later, so it's fine. I'm Connor Southwell, joined by Paddy Davitt, Seaman and Adam Harvey to reflect on what was a very, very good afternoon for Norwich. Some excellent football, some excellent goals. And so I think we're going to have to talk about some certain response to a former Norwich City player as well. All of that will be covered over the next hour or so. But Paddy, it's 9 goals from 3 home games now. It's 10 points from a possible 12. I think for weeks and weeks and certainly over the summer and heading into the early weeks of the season, progress was the word we used, and it would be about how quickly we would see that. I think it's fair to say over this block of games, beyond that defeat at Swansea, it's been full of it. Progress it's been excellent, hasn't it, the last few weeks?
Progress, but also points, which was kind of where Johannes, prior to this, kind of bookended by the 2 international breaks, felt that there was signs on the pitch, but hadn't translated. Not in Borja science, we'll get into him, but hadn't translated into maybe the points haul. He thought they were a little bit below par. You couldn't really say that they are now for this period, and that really is encouraging now that not only are the performances continuing in the same vein and embellishing as well now, goals being one of the metrics you can look at there, the goal scored, but that's translating into results, because as he has repeatedly said, it's fine saying this is a process, this will take time, patience is required, we're not going to be the finished article. Brackets, we also need to show something to the fan base, to any other stakeholder out there as well, that this can be translated into here in the here and now points to get them up the table, get them into that, albeit still early, but that promotion conversation as the league starts to take shape. And boy, have they done that, and it's credit to them, really. And frustrating that we got to wait 2 weeks before we pick it up again at Stoke, but when we hit Stoke, that swing now between there and Christmas for me, I know there's one more international period there in November, if I'm right in saying, but it's hard to see now how this rows back. I can only see it going one way now, and of course lots of things have to continue and continue on and evolve further, but the elements are there now, and every week is almost adding to the circumstantial evidence that this looks something that could be sustainable, could really lead to quite an exciting season. What that looks like in the final analysis, time will tell. But in terms of promotion, but there's no doubt that, and again it's been underlined today, against the team who came here 3 wins on the spin and were on their own very good development cycle, that that could have been anything in terms of Norwich's final margin today. And when you think we're, 9 games now, I think 9 league games. I mean, to have achieved this in 9 games is really probably does underline that, as a certain sporting director intimated to us when Johannes was unveiled, that they had to jump for this guy because they felt he's on a train going that way in terms of his career trajectory. And if they'd left it any longer, he'd have outstripped Norwich as a potential managerial appointment. And everything we're now seeing in this first 9-game block of league games would lead you to think that that confidence wasn't misplaced, because how he carries himself, the changes he's affected, the improvements he's made in players he inherited, and obviously the players he's added, and all of that. I know it's early to go hard and fast in the assessments, but the evidence is stacking up now that he is the real deal, and he's got a group of players now, both ones he inherited and ones he's brought in, who are really buying into his methods because they can see the tangible outcomes on the pitch. And the sun was shining again at Carrow Road off the pitch, and it feels like Norwich are operating in a shimmering glow at the minute. So it is a frustration really that 2 weeks is we have to pause it, and hopefully they can continue in the same vein. But hard not to get too excited, because the platform is there now for this season to be a very good one. As I say, nobody can really say at this point what that outcome is, whether that is promotion to the Premier League, whether it's just being in and around the top 6, whether it is a playoff tilt again, and they just fall short and go again next season in the Championship. But everything we hoped, I guess, when Norwich went for this very bold appointment in terms of a almost a top to bottom refresh of the football club in its outlook, its approach, what matters to it, reconnecting to certain fan base that maybe that had felt a bit disenfranchised by it. You know, I mean, all of that is clearly happening, and it's only going to go hopefully further down the path of a football club who feel like they're on the way back.
And that's it, isn't it? Because we can talk about top six and promotion and get carried away in those terms. But I think actually if you keep your feet on the ground, what you can say with real certainty at this stage, 9 games in, is that it's fun, isn't it? It's fun to watch, and it looks from a playing perspective as well like it's really fun to play.
Yeah, I think everyone's enjoying probably coming to Carrow Road every couple of weeks now, and it feels like a much more fun place to be, not only because there's this sense of change and this sense that the atmosphere is quite different around the club to what it has been for the last couple of years, but just in terms of the entertainment. I think you turn up and you know that there's a team there committed to, yes, results, but also playing in a way that fans are engaged with, and not just purely based on goals and results and maybe, you know, a couple of celebrations in the game and then one big cheer on the final whistle and then everybody goes home. It feels like people are turning up to watch not only a physical test and a battle between two teams, but an actual entertainment product. And I think ultimately that's what football is. That's what professional sport is. That's why these players are able to be paid to do this on a full-time basis. It's because people like to watch and they like to see a good product. And it feels like it maybe has been slightly more results-based the last couple of years. It feels like now it's more geared to a whole complete product and maybe seeing beyond just the championship grind and getting 3 points, because this whole club now feels like it's headed in the direction that Johannes Hoff Thorup is pointing towards. Him, the players, obviously the people above him who decided to appoint him, and Ben Napper and the way that he's spoken about football, it's all aligned at the moment, and it's all, as he said, pretty fun and pretty entertaining. So yeah, Carrow Road is a good place to be, and the object is that they can go and do that on the road as well, which, to be fair, they did do at Coventry, they did do at Derby. Feels like, yeah, it's all heading in the right direction, and yeah, I think fun is definitely the right word to use.
It's substance, isn't it? Because I think when a lot of people would have thought maybe externally, outside of Norwich, who didn't live through last season, everything that it was, would have sort of gone, well, they finished in the top 6, they're finishing the playoffs. Yes, they were short of it, but it's the process of getting there. But it was more than that. I mean, we all lived through it. It was at points quite hard to watch, if we're honest, and it was a style of play that basically meant that you have to win, because if you play in that way and you don't win, then there's not really a lot of substance to it. Whereas this now, you know, we've spoken about this before, it's got young players who, yes, are making mistakes, but you look at someone like Kellen Fisher at the moment, it's just incredibly exciting to watch him, I think, learn and develop. But equally, when those mistakes arrive, it's not factored into, well, this is just in a player and you have to accept it as their level. It is part of a process to something else. And that feels like probably the team a lot more wider. And I think this probably all links back to the first thing that Paddy said, Adam, which is it's pleasing on the eye, but it's also effective as well. They're not just scoring the second goal that they scored today, which is tremendous in terms of a team move. They're not just scoring that because it looks pretty. They're doing that because it's effective and it's yielding results and it's yielding points. So there is a substance there, and it's now, you know, from let's be honest, we were I remember us being in Austria and speaking about pre-season, and it was a bit like, well, this isn't looking great, and the style of play that they're in, they're conceding goals. It doesn't really look like they're going to be able to score any. To get from where they were when we were sat on that very nice balcony in front of those very nice mountains, to get to now, it feels like it's been absolutely rapid rates of progress. But equally, as Sam alludes to, it's that buy-in that they've achieved, not just from the players but from the supporters as well, who are really responding to this.
Yeah, and I mean, Johannes kind of said it after the game that he still doesn't even feel they're quite there yet. And I mean, that's almost like, what levels can they reach? Because what we're seeing on the pitch at the moment is, you know, streets light years ahead of where we were this time last year. I mean, you know, I remember them beating Hull at different points under David Wagner, and I didn't sort of get the same level of buzz after the game as what I got tonight. And it's kind of pertinent because Hull obviously changed their manager for the same reason, almost, that they weren't happy with the style of play last year, despite the fact they obviously narrowly missed out on playoffs. And I was speaking to the whole fan pre-game, and he kind of sort of almost intimate the same thing. It's difficult from maybe afar. You look at a club and you see Norwich finish 6th last season, and you think, oh, that's positive. They must have had a good season, but internally as a fan base, the fans weren't happy, and you only got to see the reaction post game today. I think the fans are happy now. They're seeing their team almost be sort of brought back to life almost. This team that we want to see on the pitch, attacking, young players, loads of excitement, going to Carrow Road. Even if Norwich don't get the result, providing that you see on the pitch a team that's progressing, and is making the right steps, has an identity, then I think you can be happy with what you're seeing on from the team, from the club, and it feels like they've got loads of shrewd operators in those sort of seats above, and even on the manager front, I think as Paddy said, he's going in one direction and that's up. So lots of positives, which I'm sure we'll get break into as we move through this podcast.
Yeah, and on Thorup, I think it's quite easy to forget that that's a guy who was coaching in the Europa League, and I mean he's 35. It's a remarkable trajectory. So I think almost from him, even though it is a step up in his career in terms of levels and type of competitions, the Championship's definitely not where the Europa League is in terms of quality, but the way that he is setting Norwich up, the style of play, the improvement that he's got out of players, not just, of course, Callum Fisher and Callum Doyle and the younger Jose Cordoba, they're going to be the ones, Borja Sainz, they're going to be the ones that are highlighted, but Shane Duffy as well, Kenny McLean, Marcelino Nunez, who isn't, I'm not saying he's an old player, he's 24, but someone who's played a lot of games for Norwich. The improvement that he's getting out of that base level of Norwich players is really impressive as well, and that probably gets to the heart of kind of what he is as a coach, which is not just a developer of players individually, but of a team, because the structures that he's inbuilt and embedded into this Norwich team already are incredibly, not just impressive, but effective. They're making life very difficult for some very good Championship teams and some very good Championship coaches.
And the speed he's done it though, that is the most impressive facet. That are we even a quarter of the way through? I don't think we are. If you slice up 46 game season, so. And you talked about the reference point from pre-season, but you can probably cut any head coach, new or old, in the job slack in pre-season because it is, phony war sort of territory. But to do it when, Oxford onwards, and as he said, Oxford was so far below where he wants this club to be and what his vision of how you play the game is. So it's almost in 8 games, really, 8 league games that we've got to this point now where it feels almost innate in those players you've referenced now, the more established ones who've immersed themselves and wanted to be open enough to take on new ideas and maybe new demands. Duffy being a case in point. Kenny McLean, he's spoken about as well. Johannes, about how he's receptive, he wants to learn. Even players who the other side of 30 in terms of their playing careers, and from that to a Callum Fisher who probably was receptive to a new coach coming in, but has really embraced. Some quite challenging tactical concepts that he's asked him to play, and maybe different to certainly how he would have been asked to play under previous Norwich managers, maybe in his time at Bromley, and very different style of fullback play. And the fact that he was willing to step up and accept that responsibility, all of it, to me, the only imponderable with Thorup, I don't think, because as you rightly said, at 35 to be coaching in a decent level in a Danish club who are going for titles, but also in Europe as well, and some eye-catching results in Europe. It wasn't, is this guy of a caliber that he could come in and do the job? It's would his methods transfer as quickly as they have, and we might be looking very silly if we sat here in December and they've gone on a 10-game losing streak. Yeah. Well, I told you it was a rash appointment. We'll delete this episode, but it's very hard to foresee that scenario playing out. So that's the impressive element that he, as a still relatively young coach in terms of pure coaching at senior level, has managed to come into not only just English football and all its unique peculiarities, but the Championship as well, with the relentlessness of the schedule. We've now just come off the back of a 3-game week. I'm pretty sure he wouldn't have had too many of them in Denmark with Nordsjælland, maybe only with the European cycle overlaying onto the Superliga. But that is par for the course in England, and he's dealt with the challenges that throws up in terms of the physical output needed from worth pointing out, I think that was an unchanged 11 today from midweek. So, much as he talked on Friday that he might need to shuffle his pack, again, it's great testament to him, to those players, to the support staff, the medical and physical people around them, that they could get the same 11 who had to go to the well in a very gruelling game against Leeds in midweek. And yet there was no sense of that fatigue or anything today about that performance. There was savage intent. Norwich, and we'll get into it, Norwich should have been 2-0 up easily before they actually scored the first of their 4 goals. So, all you see from that man and how he operates is just impressive. How he carries himself, how he speaks, how he communicates through us to the fan base, his style, and clearly...
Fashion, or...
Well... I don't think I can talk about fashion, but if you want to throw in fashion,
I thought you were going to start speaking about his loafers.
No, I'm keeping it purely down to the football, Connor. But also, we're not party to how he puts his methods across at Colney. But what we are party to is that shop window, that 90 minutes on a Saturday or a Tuesday, and the fruits of his labours and his coaching staff at Colney. And like I say, 10 points from 15, the last 15 played, and the style that they're doing it and the goals they're scoring. And defensively, again, he was quick to point out today, there's passages of that game he didn't like, and he says they will have to be better in terms of, you can defend, but there's a method of defending, and it doesn't have to be almost camped on the edge of your own 18-yard box. It can be in terms of how you structurally set up against the ball, and even that, even in the midst of a 4-0 win, when he could just eulogise about how good his team was, he still very much is picking apart a performance and where they can be better and where they can improve, to take Adam's point. So, it's just impressive. That's the one word I would use about him, and the way and everything that he has achieved thus far in a relatively short period of time. And it's just it just sort of you can't wait now for the games to come, and that wasn't always the case, was it? You'd almost look ahead with a bit of trepidation to a fixture list, and that's going to be a tricky away game, or they're going very well, that's going to be tough at home. I mean, it will take me a long time to get the Southampton home game here out of my system last season. What was the possession stat for Norwich? Was it 20? 25% possession, and effectively Norwich and David Wagner saying, we cannot take you on at a game of football. We're going to shut this game down. We're going to cling to a point, which they got, fair enough. But that cuts to your point that they were achieving results that were good enough to get them to the top 6. But the style and the methodology of how they got that was soporific. And, I think if we're offered Hoff ball as opposed to Wagner ball, then you're not going to find, I don't think, one Norwich fan who would plump for the former. So, as I say, very impressive, and the sky is the limit, to quote a cliche.
It is, and I think what sums it up, actually, on Tuesday night, there was a moment, 1-1 against Leeds, who are promotion favourites. They've been backed by pretty much everyone, I think, including me, and I don't know if you backed them, Sam, maybe not?
I'm not sure I did. Maybe I did.
I can't remember. It was a long while ago, but I definitely did, and so have lots and lots of other people, quite rightly. But in that game, it's 1-1. They've just scored. They've got the momentum, and the substitutions he made, I can't remember exactly what they were, but they were very attacking, weren't they? He threw, I think, Schwartau on and Gordon on at 1-1, and it sort of wrestled the initiative back to Norwich, instead of what I think most coaches would have done, and certainly maybe what Norwich would have done last year, which would have been about, right, who have we got on the bench that's a defender? Come on, you come, lads. It was a bit like that, and that gets to the point, Sam, because all of this just feels like a culture shift, a mentality shift away from basically scoring a goal and then sitting back and seeing out results. And look, fair enough, it worked, it got them to the playoffs fine, and that's always going to be the defence that's offered. But I think as a supporter, you just want more than that. You want to see a Norwich City team in the Championship going toe-to-toe with Leeds United. You look at the games that they've had so far already this season, they've drawn with and this is why I think there is excitement. They've drawn with Sheffield United, who under Chris Wilder are going to be very good. Leeds, and have just come down from the Premier League. Leeds, that we've spoken about. Watford, who came into that game off after a really good start. Well, they dismantled them 4-1. Harley have won 3 games on the bounce, and we can argue about the opposition, but they've done that, and lots of people are speaking about improvement. Well, they've put them away 4-0. Coventry, who again people were tipping for the top 6, maybe don't look as good as that. Sorry, Pad, but they were getting tipped for that. They went there and won 1-0. Derby, who very unique game, I think, at this level, maybe besides Millwall in terms of the physicality. They went there and won, playing in the way that they want to play. All of this is sort of evidence against very, very good teams at this level that what they're implementing is working. It's that mindset as well that supporters are buying into.
Yeah, and I think actually Hull was a good comparison because by all accounts they've got a similarly, attack, proactive system and making it about positivity and being on the ball and
Heart attack football.
well, that's it. Yeah, that optimism that maybe borders on ridiculousness at times. And I think that was maybe the fear when Thorup was speaking when he initially came in, and it was basically possession. I want the ball. I want to attack. Everything will be based on how Norwich attack first of all. And if you look at that negatively, I think what you see is a team like Hull, where actually it was almost kamikaze football the way that they approached things at Carrow Road this afternoon. But I think Thorup has shown, and his team, how you can have that mentality of thinking about attacking first and proactivity and optimism in your football without making it ridiculous and without taking unnecessary risks and putting yourself in a really difficult position every time you face good opposition. And I think a lot of people are fast to tag football like that with naivety, but that's not something that comes across whatsoever from this team. It seems like, yes, Norwich want to attack, they want to move the ball quickly and get up the pitch, and they want to think about how they can make the game about themselves first and foremost. But they're doing it in a sustainable, clever, realistic way that works with the players that they've got. And it's not even pragmatism that's getting there. It's just drilling that team really hard so that they know their roles really well. They know exactly what they have to do to both produce that attacking output and protect themselves in a defensive way. So where a lot of teams who set out to achieve the same things that Norwich want to achieve can be labelled with that naivety, and they can look a bit ragged at times and a bit overly swashbuckling as maybe Hull were at Carrow Road, I think Norwich have done it with a level of knowledge and a level of tactical ingenuity that shows you they can do it without exposing themselves to the extent that their opposition did today. And I think that's credit to Thorup. It's credit to the intelligence of his players to be able to take on that system so quickly and what they're being asked to do so quickly. They're clearly learning in a really good way and learning from somebody who knows how to get the best out of those players. So yeah, it's looking good all round. As Paddy said, we could end up looking quite silly in a few weeks if it doesn't continue in this vein. But right now, it feels like it's sustainable rather than just a high-risk sort of flash in the pan.
Yes, of course. And
I have remembered about Leeds. I did back Leeds, by the way. Yeah,
okay.
Because I remember writing about the fact that whichever one of those four didn't go up was going to go up. So.
And I think, to be fair, that does, and we're going off on a tangent a bit, but the Championship more generally this year does feel open. It doesn't feel like we've got a team that is going to, or two as it was, three last year that are going to go and smash above 90 points. Just doesn't. Maybe I'll look silly in a couple of months, but it just doesn't quite feel like we're there. Certainly beyond Leeds, I don't think at this stage, albeit howlers, and I think Sheffield United look pretty good at the moment, but again they're kind of ticking along rather than perhaps blowing teams away. So yeah, we'll see. It does feel like maybe there's an opportunity there for a team if they could get something going. But I think I don't think we're getting carried away. I think we're reflecting a snapshot in time, and that snapshot in time might change and probably will change. But you can only stand where you are in the present, can't you? So if they're going to lose at Stoke and Preston, which is entirely plausible, we know what this league is like, then hey, we'll reflect that in the same way. But on this point, Adam, I think two individuals that you think of. So Josh Sargent, who scored a lot of goals last year, to be fair, in the system that they were playing, and they were probably they were massively dependent on his output to get that run going that they got from certainly at home from Carrow Road to get into the playoffs, that charge. Borja Sainz is somebody who has really been unlocked by this style of play. And we spoke about him a couple of weeks ago and how his numbers need to improve, and he must have been listening because, goodness me, they've improved. But I think it feeds into the wider point that we were talking about. I remember Paddy speaking to Johannes in the forum all those months ago, and he was saying, look, attacking players are going to enjoy playing the way that we want to play, because they're going to get lots of touches, lots of opportunities. And I think that's maybe summed up by the sublime and the ridiculous today. The ridiculous being going through one-on-one and trying to lob a goalkeeper. He tried an overhead kick at one stage as well, which I think after juggling it past 3 defenders, I think that maybe encapsulates where he is in terms of confidence. But then to the finish that he applied. But Josh Sargent as well, even missing a penalty, which Norwich could have won by 5 today, quite comfortably. Could have won by 7 probably with the opportunities that they created. Those attacking players, and this probably goes back to really the nub of the conversation at the moment, which is it's not just a sexy brand of football, it's an effective one, and one's that he's getting attacking players in really good areas to really hurt opposition.
Yeah, it feels like they can play with more sort of a freedom now, and they can be expressive. Almost going back to that Southampton game, if Sargent doesn't take that chance, Norwich don't get anything from the game. Now it's like it doesn't really matter if he's missed one opportunity, because he'll get another 4, and we know Josh Sargent at this level, he scores goals. Borja signs, that's pertinent. That chance where he goes through, and we're all sat there frustrated, thinking, why has he tried that for? But the reality is, he gets exactly almost the same opportunity then later on in the game, and he takes it, and he'll know, and Nunez had another chance, and then he goes and scores almost a harder goal, moments later. So, yeah, I think goals is clear to see, but they're also now starting to show defensively there is improvements. Obviously, there's still work to be done there, and I think Johannes was quite open about that post-match. But, you look at kind of recent games, they've not conceded more than 2 all season, I think I'm right in saying, in any game. And, and even those games, Oxford obviously is almost an anomaly. You almost can take that one out of the equation. And Derby, there's obviously... you can dispute the second goal in that one. So I think the fact they're progressing in the right way as well there is positive. So, yeah, the clinical nature, when you've got Borja Signs and Josh Sargent, both full of confidence at this level, both of them, I think, have got the ability to hit double figures in the goal and assist tally this season. Sam put a stat at his Signs already, matched his tally from last season. And, I think we all sort of sat here in the summertime, and they lost Sarah, they lost Rowe, and you're sat there thinking, okay, who's going to step up and make that difference? And I think Sargent, you almost, could bank on him doing that, because he's a player at this level who is too good for this level. He's really, starting to show he probably is a Premier League grade or top flight division somewhere else now. And Signs, we saw flashes of it last year, and there's still that kind of rawness at different points, or that sort of lack of maturity maybe, where he got in moments in games and you thought, okay, he's trying to do something too much or trying to overplay. I think now they've sort of tried to rein that in a little bit with him, and he's still got that about him, because that's what makes him special. But I think the fact they're now starting to see a consistency in his performance levels and a consistency in his goal and assist output. And then you've also got players like Nunez, who I think we spoke about as well. Me and Sam actually on a preview show a couple of weeks back about him trying to improve his numbers, and it feels like he's starting to go in that way, where he's going to start to contribute goals and assists. And I think, everyone around the whole team now, it feels like everyone's got a confidence that they could chip in at some point, and that's a great place to be, because that's almost the recipe for success. You need a whole team where if a player's injured, and you've got someone else who can step in and make that mark, and I think now it feels like they've got a multitude of players off the bench that can do that.
Yeah, it's Norwich City's SAS, isn't it? Sainz and Sargent. I've got the Championship top goal scorers in front of me. Borja Sainz 7th in 7 in 9. I mean, you talk about double figures. He might do that by the end of November, or by the next break, by the rate that he's going. Two assists in that as well. So again, 9 goal contributions in 9 games is staggering. Sargent as well, 4 goals, 3 assists. So we're talking about 7 goal contributions in 9. They're stupid numbers, aren't they? Really, and the fact it's only Josh Madger in the Championship who can match Borja Sainz in terms of goals. The next is Duncan Watmore with 5, and then Sargent with 4. There's a host of really good players who are on 4, and then even assists. Sargent's got 3. Callum Doyle's got 3. We're looking at Norwich players. Kenny McLean's got 3. We're talking about Norwich players towards the upper ends of these charts, but Sainz and Sargent, unlocking those two has been, along with a lot of the defensive changes and structural changes that we've spoken about, has been the key to this uplift between probably the September break and October break.
Yeah, well, I mean, you break it down, and if your whole essence of how you want to approach a game is it's about chance creation, then that's only going to be viable if you have players who are able to take that, or a good proportion of those chances. And in Sainz and in Sargent, I mean, we didn't need this goal spurt, assist spurt at the start of this season to tell us that Josh Sargent is a Championship striker of some repute, because he did it either side of like 4 months out injured last season, and without his goals to go sort of labouring back the point about last season and the effectiveness versus how it was achieved. Josh Sargent's not in that team last season. They're nowhere near the top 6, nowhere near into the playoffs. He was effectively the difference. So, if you've got players of that calibre, who are, as you rightly say, they're Connor as good as anything in the Championship, it would seem. Then you can weave around them a system of play and a style and an approach that is possession based, is chance creation based. Then you just need to keep them healthy, keep them fit, keep them healthy. In Sainz's case, keep him focused. We go back to which feels a long time ago now, but it wasn't that. It was the start of this 5-game block of post first international break, which was the Swansea game, where he spurned quite a number of chances late on. They could have easily got something that day. And Johannes said, look, just control your emotions. That is the only factor in you fulfilling your potential and going on to be the player that he's starting to show right here and right now, but could be in a year or two's time. And that's considerably better than Championship grade. And it's just about, you're going to miss chances. That's the nature of how you play on the pitch, but don't lose your focus. Don't be distracted by that. Go again. And case in point today, that first chance, I looked straight down at Thorup and his hands went to his head. He could not believe that he tried such a, well, I think I've used the word extravagant on a few platforms today, in that position. When I contrast, same end of the pitch, pretty similar movement to his Watford goal where McLean's played him through, and he's ran through and he had time to think about it as he did today, and it was just clinical, how he bent that ball inside the near post that day. And to try what he did there, clearly was not the right choice, but it didn't affect him. He came back, roaring back. It was only a matter of minutes thereafter where he was serving up the first of 2 assists on the day for Nunes, and then similar position on the pitch. He controls that ball from Callum Doyle, and then the keeper's mind his keeper's positioning makes his mind up. He's out of his area, but still, had to execute it and did. And that is a player who is not just heeding his manager's words, but putting them into practice. And my only concern is with those two players that once January Raw's interview, if they continue in this vein, it is inevitable they will be linked with moves away. Now, of course, Norwich hold the balance of power in that situation, but they're the sort of unwanted distractions that will come as a result of doing what they're going to be doing, it feels, between now and January. And if it's not January, then you can guarantee, particularly if Norwich is still in the Championship, those two players are going to be Gabby Sarah hot, and that's obviously something that we can get our teeth into when the summer comes around. We don't need to fast forward to that, but it has to be said right here, right now. If your club's in the Premier League, if your club's in the top leagues in Europe, you're looking at these two players, and if they continue on this path, then they're going to be on a lot of recruitment radars, and nice problem to have. And that's kind of where Thorup was coming at it with the Sarah situation. It's a good testament to the work Norwich are doing. If they can develop players to the point where clubs in top leagues in Europe want to take your players, you're doing something right. But we all hope that, the story ends with those two firing Norwich to the Premier League and then going on to be part of an attempt at Norwich sustaining themselves in the Premier League. That's the perfect scenario. But there's no doubt. I think I said it might have been on the last podcast. If not, it was maybe the Q&A. But while not wishing to heap the Buendia Pookie pressure on them, but in terms of their effectiveness, in terms of their importance to a group of players, it's going to get to those levels if they continue to carry on, because they score and they assist in these quantities. Norwich will be in and around the promotion race to come the turn of the year. It's inevitable. So, bit early yet, maybe to be carrying the weight of expectancy that those two players turned out to be in terms of how crucial they were to a very successful Championship period for Norwich not all that long ago. But that's the levels we're going to get to with these two players, because they are quite clearly better than the Championship, and not just individually, but as a pair. And obviously, Sainz in that regard isn't an out-and-out striker. He's a winger who has those striker instincts, but You saw how they combined at Derby. You know, it's Sargent with assists for Science today, the other way around for that brilliant second goal. And, you know, it's just a shame that penalty came back off the post. But that what they can achieve, I think, is almost they can be the catalyst, and they're starting to show that. They can be the spark between this being a transitional season maybe for Norwich, which is where we probably felt we were going to pitch it before a ball was kicked against Oxford, to actually a season that could end in promotion. And let's be honest, if come May Norwich are back in the Premier League, if they are, I've gone way above where we needed to pitch at this stage, then you can guarantee that Bohar Science and Josh Sargent will be absolutely critical to that, because you know they are quite clearly as individuals and a pair. I look around the Championship, I can't see any better. I can't see any better than those two players. So in their positions on the field, and that's really exciting. I mean, Leeds had a pair of very good wide players, to be fair, midweek in Nonto and Ramazani, but you know, I'd take Josh Sargent over Matteo Joseph in terms of the striking position. So would any of us swap Science and Sargent for any other pair in the Championship? I'll throw that to you boys. I can't think of anybody. Yeah, I'm trying to think. I'm clicking through the top teams at the top of the division, and I don't think there's any you would swap out for those two.
Sargent's the best 9, I think, for me as a package. Yeah, I think.
Nonto is obviously a very good player.
Yeah, I think the Leeds ones, but I'm trying to think of otherwise. You boys got any other shouts?
I think so. I think I'd agree with that.
We'll throw that out there, because I'm sure there are some that maybe we're overlooking, without sort of researching it. I'm sure there's maybe an obvious name that we're missing, but yeah, we're going to take a lay down, because that was a lot of excitement for a first half of a podcast, and then we'll come back and talk about some more sobering subjects in part 2. See you in a second. This is the PinkUn.com Norwich City podcast, basking in the glory of a 4-0 home win for Norwich City over Hull this afternoon. Sam, let's dive straight back in with some game-related issues. I don't think Tim Volta was happy with 2 of the decisions in the game, which I don't. I'll be honest, I don't really. I understand maybe he's lost 4-0 and he needs a deflection tactic, but one was for a penalty that Norwich ultimately missed. So, and I think it was handball because his arm's out there. And the second one, which was a goal 3-0 at 4-0, 3-0, 3-0. So we're talking about a game going 3-1. So it's ball men fighting over a cone, really. So I mean, what were your view on both decisions? This is like referee's corner from last week that we opened up.
Yeah, I'm not sure it needs as much attention, because there's definitely not as much controversy in there for me. Partly because, as you say, the game would not really have changed that much. It might have been a different margin of victory. It might have been a slightly different feeling around Carrow Road upon the full-time whistle. But I think especially for Tim Volta's team, wouldn't really change much. I can't imagine those visiting fans would have been especially pleased with the performance they served up in a 3-1 defeat, if that was how it ended up. But I think for the penalty, it's definitely a penalty for me. I think watching it back, it does look like Coyle moves his hand out to block that ball, and I don't think it hits any other part of his body if that hand isn't there. I think it looked like it was actually going to be quite a close one from Nunez. It looks like if it had been on target, it almost certainly would have gone in. You can't really tell whether it's doing that or it's hitting the post or going just wide, but it was definitely but it's definitely a pretty close one. And yeah, I think it's definitely handball for me, that one. The goal, I have a bit more sympathy with him. There's one angle that's very side on that makes it look like it is pretty high up the arm, if not sort of the shoulder and the edge of the chest. So I have more sympathy with him for that one. And I think they might have been just slightly unlucky. But to be honest, different angles make it look quite different. The motion that he makes to make contact with the ball, you can completely see why the linesman who stood behind him has made that decision. And George Long is stood right next to him as he scores the goal, and he looked absolutely outraged. So if it was the wrong call, then it was very marginal. I thought overall that the referee actually had quite a good game. One of those where, thankfully for once, we're not talking about it too much aside from this small section of the podcast. But yeah, my main takeaway from that would be that, as you said, it's more of a deflection tactic. It's not really something that would have changed the game ultimately for me. Norwich win no matter what. The referee makes of either of those decisions. So not really a game changer for me. Not worth too much consideration on the Norwich side, and probably quite wishful thinking from Tim Volter there.
And most importantly, all of the match officials knew the boundaries of the pitch this week. Yeah. So that's always helpful, I think, when it comes to officiating.
Well, maybe not to Norwich.
Maybe not to Norwich. No, it's true. Adam, I wanted to speak to you about Cade Gordon, because someone who I think we were quite impressed with when he came on against Leeds, and we spoke about it earlier, and not just the emphasis of that change, but actually the impact of it. He sort of wrestled back after what was quite an intense period of Leeds pressure. He helped Norwich regain some composure and some momentum in that game. But he came on today and offered a similar amount of energy. And I was actually really pleased he got the goal that he did, because you go back to the start of that move, and it was a period where Norwich were getting penned in a little bit by Hull. Their press was a bit inconsistent all afternoon, but this was one of the spells where they managed to get it right for a period. And it was actually a brilliant bit of play from him that got Norwich out onto the left, and I think with Borja Sainz, and then it was helped on. So when it actually fell to him and he finished it, it was excellent. But his impact over the last two games, I think it's his birthday as well, and he got an extra card from the referee towards the end as well to celebrate the occasion. But his impact over the last few weeks, there's evidence and growing evidence there that it's a player that if Norwich can get him up to the right fitness levels, is somebody who, particularly maybe with where Seaman is at the moment as well, maybe he's pushing himself forward for a starting spot in the coming weeks.
Yeah, I mean, when he sort of arrived at the club, I think there was almost a little bit of like, well, who's this guy? Where's he come from? Obviously, I think you don't really get offered a debut by Jurgen Klopp at Liverpool unless you've got something about you, and we're starting to see that now. He's getting a little bit more up to speed, and it's obviously going to be a even more slow and gradual process. He's now going to be going away with the England youth setup, and hopefully get some more minutes there, because it is just trying to build on that match fitness. But he's clearly taken on board what's being asked of him, and he is a completely different wide man almost to what they've got. He's probably obviously got the pace a little bit more than maybe some of the others, and he offers them a different threat that they don't have. So yeah, I think he was rewarded with that that goal today, and well deserved on a birthday. Only 20 years old as well, which again, it's almost like there's so much more growth in this player, and you're just hoping that he can reach the levels that he's clearly got, because he's clearly a talented player. That's why Liverpool bought him from Derby, and I just think there's a real talent there. And yeah, you're right, he's going to be pushing on the door, because I think Sianas is actually starting to grow into games a little bit. I think he's one of these that's, again, just needs that goal. Strikes me a little bit as a confidence player, and he's obviously adapted to a completely different country and league and all these various facets that have come into play. And his touch is good, and there's some really nice moments, but just can't quite find the back of the net at the moment, and maybe certain positions where you think, right, even today I think there was one where he should have probably been up the pitch a little bit more. He might have been slid in for a really good opportunity, and it's just those little moments where Cade Gordon clearly playing with a bit of freedom, obviously a young player, and maybe a little bit more used to, obviously, he's not switched countries or anything like that, so maybe just that sort of feeling at home a little bit, particularly sort of around the Kellen Fishers of the world, which you'd have known from the youth setups with England. So maybe just settled a little bit more, and I'm excited to see what he's got, because he looks quite explosive, and I think he's the sort of player that fans will enjoy watching, because he's going to get bums off seats, and he's got that little bit of magic. And yeah, good to see him get on the score sheet today, because that will hopefully increase his mood, his confidence, moving on to another big patch of games before the next break.
Yeah, I think there's always scepticism. I think Norwich have had their few in the past when you get a young lad on loan, particularly maybe wingers. I think it's quite an inconsistent position at the best of times, but when you get one in from one of those bigger clubs, it's always a bit sort of like, what are you going to get? And it certainly, from the evidence that he's shown so far, it looks like there is real talent there, and not just talent, but a real willingness to work hard and to come down to the Championship and prove himself. That's been nice. And of course, Paddy, I'm sure it won't be lost on most people, some irony that it was him that got on the score sheet, given that it was him that effectively replaced Abu Kamara in that Norwich City team. He obviously returned as a Hull City player this afternoon. There's been a little bit of chatter post-match about the reaction and the reception that he got from Carrow Road and Norwich City supporters, probably speaking about one section of the stadium in particular, as we usually are with these things, where players go to warm up. What did you make of it? Did it cross a line in your view?
Well, I mean, let's work it out. I mean, from a starting point, that he requested to leave Norwich City. He handed in a transfer request, him and his representatives, him and his family. So if anybody thought he was going to get a warm reception today, a warm in the the welcome home, Abu, all is forgiven, then I'm not sure why anybody would have arrived at that conclusion. So human nature would tell you, if you're a Norwich fan turning up today, there's a player now in the opposition ranks who was very open that, having been nurtured by Norwich and come through their academy and had a very successful loan at Portsmouth last season, where he did prove, his undoubted talent, which he has. But for whatever reason, wasn't willing to, because Johannes wasn't pushing him out the door. I mean, let's get that clear as well. Even when the move had gone through, he said, look, I like the player. We saw he gave him plenty of opportunities in pre-season. He played him in the League Cup first game. He felt, Johannes, that there was a player there who could work within his system. Absolutely no doubt about it. But it felt from the outside looking in that maybe it was the time scale. Maybe from Abu's point of view, he wanted it now, but he felt he would have to come back in after Portsmouth. He should be a bit nearer to regular first team minutes for Norwich. If Norwich couldn't guarantee him that, offer him that in the here and now, but the irony isn't lost on me that he comes off the bench today, and he's been on the bench for recent games. Things can change quickly, but right now he's certainly no further forward in his career in terms of being a regular starter at Championship level. So, maybe you could argue who'd have been better off staying where he was. Is Hull, and obviously we're biased, but is Hull a step up in his career path from Norwich? I don't see it in terms of the respective aims and ambitions of those two clubs and where they're at now, where they could end up at. So that's, for me, the context to what was inevitably a reaction that wasn't very welcoming. And, Johannes talked about showing him respect, but then when I put it to him after the game today about his thoughts on the reaction, he was, candid enough that was going to be what you got. Now, did it cross the line? Others have decided it did. Elements of the whole media. There was the chap who was in the press conference after the game was directing questions to Tim Walter, their manager, along the lines of that it did cross the line. I think he's tweeted subsequently he felt it was disgraceful, if I'm not taking out of context what he said, and wanted to conflate it with the mental health sort of visibility that was there today in terms of Norwich City and before the game, and that minute's silence and just raising awareness again, as Norwich have done absolutely tremendously as a football club in recent times. Nobody could dispute that is an issue taken very seriously by anybody connected to Norwich City Football Club. So that for me is the disappointing element, that there's elements there or actors there who want to conflate, how can Norwich as a club talk about mental health and how important that is, and then treat one of their former players in a disgraceful, paraphrase, fashion. I don't see that really, from purely based on the reaction he got today. He got the reaction I would have expected as a player who made it quite clear, openly made it clear he didn't wish to be part of Norwich City's future, and a club which had nurtured him, and he was a homegrown player. He wanted no longer to be, associated with Norwich City. That's what it boils down to. Why would anybody reasonably expect then that he gets a favourable reaction? Now, we can debate about what that reaction was, what it looked like, what it felt like, what it sounded like, and whether it crossed the line, but everybody will have their own opinion and base that opinion on where they feel the line is. For me, no, that didn't cross the line. It wasn't, I'm old enough to remember, players who've gone back to former clubs and, venomous sort of response, whether it was verbal or, dare I say, physical, or, objects being thrown at players. We wasn't anywhere near those levels, and that's not to condone previous incidences with players returning to their former clubs, or even where Abu and his treatment today fits on the scale. But if you're asking me, was that disgraceful? No, I don't think that was disgraceful. I think that was a fan base, not all the fan base, but certainly elements of the fan base who maybe felt, Johannes talked about respect towards Abu. Maybe they felt disrespected from Abu, that he felt the club that had given him a chance, he didn't wish to hang around anymore. So if I'm a Norwich City fan, I'm not going to welcome that player back with open arms. I'm sorry, but I think it would be naive for anybody to expect that he would have got anything other than that type of reaction today. So, for me, I find it strange that that has been deemed maybe from the Hull end as Norwich collectively as a club and their fan base have crossed the line. I think it was more than reasonable to expect that and it wasn't I mean there was one or two sort of unpublishable chants, but you're going to get that. But I think the majority of it just was along the lines of, why would you want to leave this club when this club is on the up? And that was evidenced today and brought into sharp focus because his new club were comprehensively outplayed by his old club. So, as I say, everybody's entitled to their opinion. Everybody can draw the line where they see fit. But for me personally, was that beyond the pale? No.
I think I agree, Sam.
I can understand that people don't want to see people getting abused, and I'm sure for Abu Kamara it wasn't a very pleasant afternoon, and it wasn't nice to hear those words. As Paddy said, everyone has their line in different places, and it does come down to individually what you can sort of stand and how you look at it. But I think if you have decided that it goes over the line, and that's people's prerogative, I think painting it as a Norwich City problem is where it gets especially inaccurate for me and problematic, because it's the sort of thing that you see across football, unfortunately, and we can have a wider discussion about how you change things in a football environment and if a football environment is too toxic or not. But for me, that happens at almost any club up and down the EFL, and I wouldn't conflate it at all with the sort of mental health considerations that the club were making. I thought they put in some positive initiatives that were good to see today, and I think it's a fan base that at times is even called fairly soft and maybe that they don't give as venomous a reception to some players that people would like to be given a sterner welcome to. So I think it does come down to individuals how you view that situation. But if you are going to say that it crossed the line, then you need to look at football more widely for me rather than Norwich City, because I think that happens at many clubs across the EFL and not just this one.
And I think the one moment from what I gather, speaking to maybe people who did feel it across the line, was the moment at the end where he did try and clap Norwich fans and was met with some clap, there were some applause, and there were some people maybe calling him some of the words that we're not allowed to use. But in the same vein, that same word was used towards Louis Coyle late on when he squared up to Kay Gordon. That same word was used in different instances. I definitely heard it on Tuesday night, aimed at Leeds players. And so I don't think it is a special case. And I think it's a very separate debate to a debate around a club dedicating a day to mental health. I don't think those two things need to be compared, should be compared. I think you drag the debate down to a very dangerous place when you begin to take it in those areas, and ultimately it will come down to Abu Kamara, won't it? And how that reaction ultimately made him feel. We know off the pitch in the tunnel there was a very different reaction that he got from Norwich City players, from whatnot. Fans are emotional, fans are tribal, fans don't understand why players want to leave their football club, because that's the way they're painted. So I think any idea to try and take some sort of moral high ground over what fans chant is it's a wider discussion. But is it right? Probably not. But it's the game, and it's emotional, and it's tribal, and that's what is part of what makes it so great. So we'll part that there, and I'm sure others will maybe continue to have their debate on it. But what I did think was poor was that comparison with the mental health stuff, which I just don't think is relevant or necessary at all. Let's get back to the football then, Adam, because we spoke about Coventry probably in a very different way, because it felt like the international break was coming at a bad time off the back of obviously a first win. I guess in a sense we're probably saying the same thing, aren't we? But because of what they've done over a bigger block of time, you almost want the games to keep coming at this stage.
Yeah, particularly now they have such a big contingent of international players, which obviously is great because that means they're performing for their club and they're being recognised, and they're obviously going to go and represent their country, and that's obviously a huge honour for all of those players. But you'd sort of sat there almost watching every game, hoping that there's not an injury to a Norwich player or any of those things, and some of those where they have to go away and then maybe they don't get the minutes, and you think all that travelling could have been better spent, particularly at the moment when they're still trying to embed and ingrain this new playing style, and there's still obviously work to be done, which is something Johannes was quite open about even after the game, improvements to be made, and the fact he's going to have a fairly limited squad at Colney for the next couple of weeks to sort of continue to build on that is obviously going to be a different challenge in itself. But I think it's almost could work the other way. These players will go away with international duty now. They're full of confidence. They're probably in excitement just to keep playing football, and hopefully they perform and bring that confidence back to Carrow Road. Obviously, then when they go to Stoke and almost build on what they've already done. And I really hope, I think by the time we get sort of to the next international break, hopefully they've had another sustained period, because then it's almost the other side of that, where they then really get the proper championship run. And I think that's when they can hopefully, if they keep this momentum building, they can really kick on. And that's obviously the crucial period of the season, sort of December onwards, where, the points can be made up to try and challenge for promotion or whatever it might be that the aim is going to be this season. But it's just, I think for fans as well, it's obviously a hugely frustrating period because, some fans might enjoy international football. I'm not personally someone that's a massive fan of it. Tournaments maybe are a different story because, you're almost willing for football because it's that period in the summer where there's months without it and, you just want to see football in a live setting. I can't say I'm, really looking forward to England-Greece or England-Finland as much as I would be watching Norwich next Saturday. So, but that's a different debate for another day.
I'm going to have it. It's I tell you what, I'm livid at this international break. Absolutely, it's pointless. I understand it's a massive honour for players to go and play for their country, but Josh Sargent's got to take a 12-hour flight to go and play Panama in a friendly. That's not useful to anybody. England. I love Teemu Pukki, but they're playing Finland and Greece in the Nations League. Does anyone really care about the Nations League? Are any of you guys massively fussed about the Nations League? It's a nonsense. And to then we've had the Euros in the summer, which was a fantastic tournament. Everyone really enjoyed that. Probably don't need to see international football again until March. I don't understand why we have to have free breaks where we're playing games that nobody really cares about. They're friendlies or Nations League games. They're not qualifiers. They're not qualifying for anything. I know they can qualify through Nations League and whatnot. Fans don't really want it from domestic wise. Players are moaning that they're playing too many games. So why have we got this 2-week period? I don't get it. Particularly when we have one last month, we've got another one next month. It's a nonsense. Paddy, can you offer any defence as to why we're having an international break at this stage?
Agreed.
It's ludicrous.
I'm doing it, Johannes. Agreed. Next question.
What international games have you got lined up over the break that you're going to be sitting down and watching?
Well, the only ones would be
for enjoyment.
For enjoyment.
Yeah.
Oh well, if you strip out the Norwich angle, then none. I won't watch any of them.
That's what I mean. It's pointless, isn't it?
Well, I might be a minority, I mean, there might be a massive constituency who consume every available game of football, but I very much doubt it. 3 is the killer. I mean, I could row in behind 1 or 2, but 3 international windows.
We've not played 10 league games.
No, that's off the chart. But didn't you say, Adam, that next season they're not going to be 3? Yeah. So hopefully this time next season we won't need this debate. But right now, it's just. Particularly, as you say, heaven forbid, a Sargent picks up an injury or a Cordoba goes with Panama and Cordoba crocs Sargent. There we go. That'll be a good scenario, won't it? When them 2 countries meet, hopefully not. But I don't see what the value is really. Obviously, we're recording this only just an hour or 2 after the final whistle. But Gunny, half time today. Damaged rib apparently coming. I think he did. I remember when he came for a cross at the back post at the end of the first half. He'll have to be assessed. But if Scotland have got they're qualifiers, aren't they, as opposed to friendlies? So
they're not Nations League games then for Scotland.
Is that not? Yeah. Does that not constitute
I think if you win a group, you then get to go in a playoff game. It's something stupid.
Yeah, but just in the sense of I think there is, unless the rules have been changed now. But if it's deemed to be a non-friendly, then countries more or less can request the players report in so that they can be assessed, and then they'll make a decision whether to release them back, rather than Norwich saying no, he's not available to go. I mean, because the best scenario all round is Sargent has a mystery issue this evening, and Cordoba is feeling a bit fatigued after his injury scare midweek, and then Gunny can't meet up either, because the less Norwich players depart Colney over this next 2 weeks, the better, with our Norwich hats on. So, yeah, that's a long-winded way of saying I agree entirely with your rank, Connor.
But that's it, isn't it? It's basically like you watch, and if you're a player, I'm sure it's the same. You're basically playing games hoping not to get injured. Clubs are watching games hoping players don't get injured. It's ridiculous.
I'm assuming this is my lack of disinterest. Callum Doyle is in the young Lions, is he?
Yeah.
What if he gets injured? You take Callum Doyle now out of this Norwich side, massive detrimental impact for what, playing games that nobody's really going to be that interested in, unless you're anything to do with the young Lions.
Part of why they end up being such rubbish games is that because of that injury element. We all saw Norwich against Birmingham last season. Absolutely terrible game, because all the Norwich players knew they were going into the playoffs, and you could imagine a few of them were quite worried that they were going to get injured for the games that their season have been building up to. So, yeah, I wholeheartedly agree. I think it might be the angriest I've ever seen you.
I'm going to start a campaign, I think, to bin them off, because we just don't need them. I just don't get it. If someone can explain to me why there is the need for 3 when we haven't had 10 league games. How many games have the Premier League played? Where are we at?
7.
7 games, and they've had 2 international breaks. Ridiculous. And maybe that's where I feel like I'm going all Jurgen Klopp here, but maybe that's where the 12:30 anger needs to be aimed at. Anyway, let's end on a positive. Sam, I'm going to ask you to make 2 noises to react to 2 pieces of news, because we're not going to be able to speak to them. In terms of your excitement level, George Long's new contract, Emiliano Marcondes' arrival at Norwich City. We'll take it. That's a nice way. We're going to do that more, I think. That's a nice way to finish the podcast. PinkUn.com, of course, is your go-to survival guide throughout the international break. We're going to have hopefully a very special podcast over the break, at least 1, possibly even 2 coming your way, and we've got already some interviews in the can and some various bits and bobs that are going to come your way over the next 2 weeks to get us through to the Narcis. I have to combine his name there. The Narcis Palace derby, the other side of the break, and this again feeds into the ridiculousness of it. No games for 2 weeks, and then we've got a trip to Stoke and Preston within 3 days. Ridiculous. I've ended this podcast significantly angrier than I started it. Thank you very much for watching. Thank you for listening. We'll see you again very soon.